Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Michael Noland here, and tonight we're going to be discussing Gene Simmons of KISS and how the poor little rich boy doesn't have any friends. Now, in this article I'm discussing tonight, this one goes back a few days. There have been many articles who didn't cover everything this first article covered. And one of the things that were covered in this article was the fact that Gene Simmons had reached out to Ace Frehley and Criss, I guess both him and Paul, asking them to join them during encores on their never-ending final tour. Now, the article went on to say that Ace Frehley in particular was not willing to do that, but he would have been willing to tour with the band as, a permanent member. And Gene said that they had seen the shape that Ace Frehley was in and that they didn't think he could handle a world tour. Now, with other articles and everything, it's pretty easy to translate all of this nonsense. First of all, Ace Frehley, as an original member, is not willing to be upstaged every day only to come out at a encore to be a member on such a temporary basis, right? And Criss's ego is legendary, so I only imagine he wouldn't want to do it either. And the main point of the article is when Gene Simmons mentioned that really he doesn't have any friends. Now, he did mention that Paul Stanley is that brother that he never had, but that he doesn't even see Paul when they're not touring all that often, and that if somebody were to approach him and say, gee, I didn't have anything to do today, you want to hang out? He mentioned that he just had no room in his life for those kind of friends because, well, he's more interested in what Gene Simmons wants to do than those around him. Does that sound like megalomania to you guys? I started thinking about this and, how bands who appear with X amount of members. Let's take the Rolling Stones, for example. 5 original members. And very early in their career, Brian Jones, who actually had a whole lot to do with that band even existing at that level, had fallen into, disrepair. And the Stones didn't think, he wasn't even showing up at a lot of recording sessions, and he was out of it during the ones that he did. So they thought it was time for a change, and of course they replaced him with a member, and then of course later on Ron Wood replacing that member. So here we have one of the 60s original rock bands, and with most people at that time aware of who the 5 Rolling Stones were. Perhaps not as aware of who the 4 Beatles were. Think about that. How did we even know? I'll bet you I can right now name the Beatles in the same order that you're probably going to name them. John, Paul, George, and Ringo, right? I mean, that's how we even got to know this band. John, Paul, George, and Ringo. It would be chanted if they arrived at an airport. It would be chanted during their concerts. It would be chanted by the DJs on the radio. Now, with the Stones changing a major player within their band, this all of a sudden made it okay for other bands to do it, right? And so we would have these major bands in the following decade. Not that the Stones weren't a major player in the 70s, they would continue to be so. But then we had Led Zeppelin, right? And the bands beneath them. The Beatles, you had the Stones and the Who, and they were underneath the Beatles. Well, in the 70s, we have Led Zeppelin, and we have Deep Purple, we have Black Sabbath, and a plethora of bands that ruled the roost with them, but not quite on their level. And one of those bands, of course, Deep Purple, even being identified by marks. There would be Deep Purple Mark I, Deep Purple Mark II, and so on. And this extended and, solidified the whole idea of a rock band being able to occasionally replace members as needed. Now, over the decades, we've seen this approach come and go. Only the greatest bands able to maintain up until the end of that band their original membership. Now, if you haven't seen my video on the 20 myths that the Get Back DVD utterly destroys, take a look at that. In that video, I mentioned how Paul McCartney was being egged on by Michael Lindsay Hogg to show up at this Roman centurion kind of palatial place. And Paul said, no, that can't happen. And then when Michael Lindsay Hogg, astounded that he was being refused, asked him why, he said, well, Ringo doesn't want to do it. So now think about this. In that video, I also mentioned how Paul once described the Beatles as being a box, a three-dimensional box, people, and that each Beatle had a quarter of that internal universal space, right? And each one of them had equal veto power, and each one of them had the same amount of power within the structure of the band right up until the day they disbanded. People, this is Beatles 101 here. You know, they are the prime example of what a rock band should be. They're at the top of the heap, they did it, and you know what? There never was a John, Paul, Eric, and Ringo, was there? Not even when George stormed out of a recording session. No, the band had scruples. And you know what? Led Zeppelin followed suit. When Bonzo died, that was it. That band was kaput. And with the exceptions of some really rare reconnections of the remaining band members, the band died the day Bonzo died. And that's my entire point here. You know, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley have been known to really think themselves as, well, KISS incarnate, and that the other two members are quite interchangeable. They've proven this many times. Now, Gene Simmons went on to say that he was more interested in what he's interested in. He just doesn't have it within him to be all that interested in, well, anybody, and evidently Paul Stanley as well, because when they're not touring, they rarely see each other. And yet Gene says that Paul Stanley is the brother he never had. And really, that's my whole point here, folks, and I've mentioned this several times. Although I agree, KISS as a rock band within the history of rock and roll deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I have always been critical of the entire approach of this band from the very beginning. Oh, and by the way, you know, as critical as I've been, I have noticed by a lot of you out there when you've commented on my videos that have covered Gene Simmons, if it wasn't for KISS, many of you would never have picked up a guitar or a bass or attacked a drum kit. And for that very reason alone, this band belongs in the Hall of Fame. But my whole point of this is that although KISS started off as a rock band, they became a corporation. And there were only two members who truly had the power in that band to begin with. And you know what? I think that's what's missing in a lot of bands today. They start off with 3, 4, 5 core members, and after about 10 years, there's 1 or 2 original members left in the band. Hell, there's even a band out there that's touring without any original members, and I've made videos on that, and that of course is Foreigner. You know what? If there's any good advice for up and coming bands, I would say hang tight with the people that were there with you before the fame ever came. You know, we were talking about the Beatles. The Beatles, each and every one of them, maintained friendships that they established when they were still schoolboys, friendships that they established over in Hamburg, Germany, while they were still trying to make a name for themselves. And they were true and loyal to those friends. And guess what? The egos of the Beatles, and George Harrison said, oh, the ego of that band sometimes. But there was always enough holes in every Beatles ego to allow for friends to even give them advice. And what happened as a result? They ruled the roost, and so did Led Zeppelin. All right, believe it or not, this is my second attempt at filming this video. Something happened with the file, so I've had to reshoot, and this is an unboxing video, and I did unbox in front of the camera, and like I said, the file got corrupted, and so I can't unbox it from the beginning. I kept this thing for 3 days, folks, just to unbox it for you, and I did do that, but the file didn't hold up. But anyway, this is a new bit of wall art that I have ordered, and it's going to be replacing the clock that you see to my rear and up to the upper right-hand corner there. Now, this isn't a very expensive item. It's about $30 to $35. You can usually get this. I got it on Amazon. Do what you will with that. And it is a clock to replace the Beatle clock that I have already up there. Now, when I saw this item, I just had to have it, and I gotta tell you, this is wonderful. I'm just gonna pull it out. I'm not gonna pull it out of its temporary tray here, but you'll get the idea. Brand new Beatle record clock. I say record clock because it is in the shape and size of a vinyl record. You can actually see this. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 songs. Must be an American release. The Beatles, for most intents and purposes, would include 7 songs aside. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Hey, by the way, the names you see in front of me, they're all brand new subscribers. I am extending the time for shout outs to October 28th. So in honor of the channel turning 1, I'm gonna go ahead and extend shout outs to that period. After that, there'll be other ways we'll be doing shout outs. And of course, I've mentioned in the past, the channel right now is in the midst of going full time. Big changes coming. But if you are subscribed to the channel as of October 28th, then you will get a shout out. It may be a bit long in coming, and that's only because of the phenomenal, that word doesn't even cover it, folks, but the phenomenal amount of growth this channel has received in the last 3 months. Oh, and by the way, if you enjoyed tonight's video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps the YouTube algorithm better identify the channel to a larger audience, and well, the channel grows as a result. If you have shared my videos, thank you so much. You know, that right there, the sharing of my videos, is responsible for the first real big bump in subscribers, as well, of course, as those amazing thumbs ups that you give the video. These are all areas that the YouTube algorithm were designed to help a channel out with. So I thank you for your thumbs up. I thank you for your sharing of my videos. And you know, if you haven't subscribed to the channel as of yet, it is so easy. All you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button, hit that top bell icon, and you'll be notified of all my future videos. Anyway, that about covers it for tonight. I'm Michael Nolan. This is, of course, The Bottom Line, and I'll see you in my next video.